Lesterstone, this is a private inquiry. Kindly take your subject out there. I will not wait. What is it, then? No, this is too important. What? Lesterstone, what have you done? What have you done? I'll show you. Janley, now.
I am your servant.
He can talk. It spoke.
I am your servant. I am
It can do
your
many things,
servant.
Lesterstone, but the one thing it's most capable of doing is killing human beings. It destroys them completely and utterly. Destroys them.
Servant. I am your servant. I am your servant.
Hello ladies and gentlemen, Nick here and welcome to my review of Doctor Who, The Power of the Daleks, or rather my re-review because I previously reviewed this story on my main channel after it originally came out on DVD in 2016. I did the review in 2017 and gave a pretty positive review, I believe. I must have done. However, I have seen this story at least 5 times since that initial review. 4 more on the Steelbook Blu-ray because there was 4, because you had the black and white version on the DVD, just like on this DVD, which is what I watched when I did the previous review. So there was that. Then there was the black and white one on the Blu-ray, and then there was colour version on both DVD and Blu-ray. And me being me, I had to watch all of it. Watch it all. And boy, did I get a bit fed up with the story pretty quickly and start to get a bit tired of it. And I think after managing to get through all 4 versions, I was like, gonna leave it for a long time. Not gonna worry about this one for a while. We'll stick to getting the new ones or rewatch a couple of others. When I say get new ones I haven't seen yet, or ones that are not in my collection yet. And not gonna worry about this story anymore. We'll get around. We'll see it again, obviously, but not for a while. And yeah, that was about summer 2017. So come to February 2018, or was it? No, it was January actually. It was on the Wednesday. Come to January 2018, 19, and here it is. I watched it for the 6th time, and it's probably the most enjoyment I've had since at least viewing number 2 or number 3 overall. So that would have been the first or second of the Blu-ray set. The colour version, by the way, on that set is pretty nice. But anyway, Power of the Daleks. I've covered most of the story in the original review, so I'll try and keep this one a bit shorter, at least half as long, 25 minutes, as opposed to the 50-minute version. Okay, so I've already wasted enough time. The plot of The Power of the Daleks is that the Doctor has just regenerated, as we know, regeneration now, into his second incarnation, Patrick Torughton. However, being this is the first time, Ben and Polly are confused a little bit by this. The Doctor managed to tell them about the Daleks, but he didn't tell them about regeneration. So after that, Ben's suspicious. He doesn't believe this is the Doctor, whilst Polly is almost certain it is. So there's kind of a bit of an argument going forth for the first half of the story until the Dalek recognises the Doctor, and Ben's like, it recognises him, and then realises it must be the same person, and they work together to try and find Polly after she gets kidnapped. Oh, great. Though Ben does as well later on, so... Anyway, the travellers end up on the planet Vulcan, not to be confused with the Vulcan from Star Trek, where they are then mistaken for examiners. Well, the Doctor is an examiner after meeting the examiner, but the examiner is shot on the planet, and then the Doctor takes his badge So the people in the base colony think he is the Examiner, and the Doctor's has to find out who killed the Examiner and why, the original Examiner, and why. Meanwhile, there's problems with rebels who Janley, a scientist, is part of, and Lesterson's, who she's working for, he has a space capsule, and they're all wondering what's inside the space capsule. Ooh! And the cliffhanger is what's inside the space capsule, and it turns out to be Daleks, although there is a very nice clue when the Doctor picks up a piece of metal and says extermination, and get the Power of the Daleks Dalek music. And we heard that earlier on in the episode where he found another piece that the Doctor had, and he uses that to get both pieces to get inside the spaceship, the capsule, and then eventually Ben and Polly discovered the Daleks. Part 2 sees them wondering what's happened to a missing Dalek that was in the capsule, and they realise Lesterson must have taken one out, though Lesterson keeps denying this. And the Doctor, Ben and Polly continue to inquire around the base a bit about the Daleks and stuff that's going on. The Deputy Governor, Quinn, is falsely accused of being the attacker, the Examiner's attacker, and for sabotaging the cables, being supposedly part of the rebel groups or stirring out troubles. It's actually him who's called the Examiner here to sort out the rebels, or help sort out the rebels. And he's been sent to prison because he's supposedly the baddie. Yay. Turns out he's actually a pretty cool guy, Quinn. He's actually a pretty good character, and we get to see him being a helpful ally later on. In the meantime, Bragan, the head of security, takes up the deputy governor position, and then later acting governor when Governor Hensel goes out to check the Outer Rim, putting acting Governor Bragan in charge. Meanwhile, after Lesterson manages to get Dalek kind of working for him and they become servants around the colony, Polly gets kidnapped and the rebels seek to use the Daleks as a way to win the revolution. So the Doctor and Ben have to try and find out where the rebels are hiding. They are having a meeting so they could try and find Polly, as well as see what they're planning to do with the Daleks. Meanwhile, the Daleks have started reproducing, and Lesterson starting to get going a bit mad because of this. He ends up seeing them reproducing at the cliffhanger of episode 4 into episode 5, and that's a very memorable scene. Some footage actually survives for this scene, along with the cliffhanger for episode 1, and a little bit in episode 6. Maybe the cliffhanger of 5 as well? Yeah, the cliffhanger of 5 and a bit of 6. Not much footage, but enough still surviving, and maybe some of the Daleks blowing up. Yeah. Eventually, Ben gets kidnapped as well, and then the Doctor discovers that Bragan is in charge of the rebels, and he has the Doctor sent down to the prison. And Lesterson eventually informs him of the Daleks reproducing, and also goes a bit, tries telling Bragan, but nobody's listening to him. Bragan's so obsessed with being governor, he's so obsessed being the dictator governor, he even has Hensel exterminated. Meanwhile, the rebels are just so determined to, use the Daleks. So basically, because everyone's so greedy and so self-centered and single-minded, that's how the Daleks came about. Even Lesterson earlier on, he was so super proud of what he'd achieved and what he found that he didn't notice until things started going downhill. But then by that point, everybody else had gotten greedy and idiotic. And eventually, there is a civil war in Part 6 between the rebels and the guards. Eventually, the Daleks decide that's it. They're going to they've done all they can. They've done all this setup. They're still pretending to be working with both sides, but at this point, it's exterminate all humans from the end of Part 5 onwards. And now there's no going back. The Doctor and Quinn escape, and rescue Polly, but there's They're recaptured. However, in Part 6 they escape again. Manage to find Ben, who's been rescued by Rebel known as... what was his name? Valmar. Found by Valmar, who turns out to be a pretty good character in the end and comes to the rescue. Or help rescue. Helps Ben and eventually helps save the day, although Janny does get exterminated. Bragan is captured by Quinn until the Daleks are defeated. Then Valmar kills him as Bragan wanted to get rid of the rebels. So that he can remain in power without a revolution on for him. And as the Daleks are exterminating everybody, left, right and centre, and even more centre, and dead centre, the Doctor eventually, with help from Valmar, manages to overload the power feeds, destroying all the Daleks. P.S. Lesson goes completely mad and even starts idolising the Daleks and gets exterminated whilst causing a distraction. So in the end, the Daleks are eventually blown up by the Doctor, causing problems for the colony's power supply, but Quinn is now the the governor, and Valmar and the rebels will now help building a better future whilst the Doctor, Ben and Polly basically leave and they go into TARDIS. Also, by the looks of it, there's a nice little bit at the end where a Dalek's eye stalk looks up. It raises its head, so it's not quite dead, whilst we hear the Doctor's recording playing. A bit like in Tomb of the Cybermen, where there was a Cybermat that sneaked out of the tomb before it was resealed. But we'll get to that with that story. So, the Power of the Daleks, how is it? It's great. It's really fun, really enjoyable. It's a bit of a drag in some places, but it's mostly good. I was talking about the story itself first before I get around to the animated bits for the animated version. But yeah, this one it's a good story. Got some decent characters, got some prick characters, but they work with the story. They're not just pricks that just happen to be there. They actually work with the story, and it works well, such as Bragan and his overall big scheme. Characters becoming stupid and idiotic and greedy is part of the plot as well, so it's actually handled really well. Patrick Torughton is fantastic in his first adventure as the Doctor, and we got kind of a mysterious thing going on. Is he not the Doctor? Is he the Doctor? Is he not the Doctor? I think this mystery could have died down a little bit more throughout the story, and maybe at the end he could have been like, by the way, I am the Doctor. I am the same man you met in 1966, and I will always be that same man. But a little bit different this time round. So a bit more, an actual conclusion to that mystery. So definitely, he definitely is the Doctor. It's not an imposter. Definitely, he is the same person. I mean, you could tell that with all the Dalek warning stuff, but he could be just like confirming it to everyone at the end. Or maybe have some memories of being a few more First Doctor references. He has a couple in Part 2, Part 3. Marco Polo, for instance. But, yeah, just something to wrap up the mystery. Of course, we all know now that it is the same Doctor. We've had 14 of them, officially. So, yeah, but as for back then, when it was brand new, I think they should have come out and say, yes, he is the Doctor by the end of the story. So, yeah. Ben and Polly are good, and I like how they've got the two sides. One completely trusts the Doctor, completely believes he's the Doctor, and the other isn't quite sure just yet. But then comes around when the Dalek recognises him. And the Dalek is able to recognise him here. I'm not sure how, but it just does. Maybe Daleks have got that sense. Supposedly, these Daleks are from after the eve of the Daleks, after the Civil War, after the rebuilding, and they've travelled back in time, and now they recognise the Doctor. That was the theory put in the Dalek Handbook, which is up here, somewhere. Up here. However, that being... if that was the case, then in Eve of the Daleks, they would have to have known that Patrick Torughton is the Doctor instead of William Hartnell. they'd have to know the Doctor has changed his face or something. By Day of the Daleks, they know. They of course know of this, but either this or Evil, they would have found out about it, and then next story, or in either in continuity or in timeline, that's when they'd recognise him. P.S. It's a great idea to use the Daleks as the first story for our new Doctor, because then audiences can watch, as well as see him coming up against the Daleks and how he reacts against them, which is something fans look forward to with every new Doctor. It also helps have audience to help with them not certain if this is is the same Doctor as the other one. If they're not quite certain of the new actor, then this will help ease them in. Some of the seasons of a new Doctor will have some recurring monsters and villains in that season to help ease the audiences in. Season 7 doesn't do this with John Pertwee, and the same could be said for Jodie Whittaker's Series 11. It's completely brand new monsters and villains for that first season. In fact, in John Pertwee's case, that first season. I was about to say Season 8 didn't do that, but then I remember Terror of the Autons was the first story, and the Master was in every single story. Pre Season 7's villains, then the Daleks would be the first ones. Same with Series 11, whilst Tim Shaw did come back at the end of that series, there was nothing else, and nothing before that until Resolution, and no monster or villain from beforehand until the Dalek came back in Resolution. With Tom Baker, his first 2 stories did not feature any returning villains or monsters, but in the last 3 stories did. The 5th Doctor, the Master, was pretty much there, and then later on we got the Cybermen. 6th Doctor, well, Season 22 was a very... Twin Dynamo didn't have anything, so that's Season 20, his side of Season 21, although Peter Davison's did, with the Silurian Sea Devils, the Daleks, the Davros and the Master. But in terms of Season 22, there were lots of returning characters. The only 2 that didn't have returning characters were Vengeance on Varos and Time Lash. Sylvester McCoy, it was just the Rani in Time the Rani, so that kind of helped with him. I think with Colin Baker's first season, he overdid it a bit, but having the Cybermen as the first story, his second story, makes sense. Christopher Eccleston, the Autons, came back in his first episode, and a Dalek came around halfway through. David Tennant, Cassandra, was brought back in his second episode to help tie it in, and then the Cybermen came along a bit later on. Matt Smith, there was a couple of Daleks later on in his season, then the Weeping Angels. Peter Capaldi, Dalek again in his second story. It's usually the Daleks that are brought back to help with the transition, but there are sometimes you'll get sometimes like the Sontarans, the Cybermen, the Master, the Autons, in Chris Eccleston's case, Cassandra. They'll help ease the audience back in with the new Doctor and help along the way. In the case of Patrick Torughton, you've got, as I mentioned, the Dalek, and you also get the Cybermen back again later on, midway through the season. Although the midway point is probably the Underwater Menace, to be honest, but midway through Troughton's bit of the season. Anyway. So I do have to mention Troughton's costume. I'm sure it's 50 to 75% of Troughton's costume is William Hartnell's, just kept on Patrick Torughton. He just changes a little bit. I think, I think he's got the bow tie. I'm wondering if William Hartnell wore that in the previous story, but eventually puts on the bow tie. He changes his coat into a blazer and makes himself look a bit more roughed up, a bit more baggy. But yeah, maybe, and also as those trousers being a little bit loose, for a smaller person, making more for a bigger person, and him being a bit smaller. Yeah, they would be a bit loose. However, I'm sure his costume is mostly William Hartnell. Maybe the animators just didn't animate some of those scenes, but I think some of the pictures from what I've seen, he is wearing half of his costume already. So I'm guessing half of Troughton's costume is left over from William Hartnell's, at least his 10th Planet one anyway. And then he changes his blazer anyway, at least, and gets out a recorder and a hat. So yeah, he does end up, he chooses his new costumes pretty much straight away. I don't think, maybe it's the fact that they didn't think having a new costume was that much necessary, just a little bit different to suit his Doctor, and then since then onwards the Doctors had very distinguishable costumes. I mean, this one is a distinguishable costume from Hartnell, but when seeing him getting his new costume, it looks like it's still half of Hartnell's, whilst future Doctors would completely discard with their predecessors' clothes and get everything brand new. Maybe one or two exceptions, but certainly I think the War Doctor keeps Paul McGann's Night of the Doctor costume for a little bit, but then eventually he changes into the costume we see him in Day of the Doctor. So, and other times they will wander around in their predecessors' clothes for a little bit before they end up choosing a new costume. Especially in the new series where they wear their predecessors' clothes for the first episode, or parts of the first episode anyway. And then choose their new costume at the end, as opposed to the classic ones, which chose their costumes a bit earlier on in their stories, probably because they had 100 minutes to play with. Yeah, 100 minutes per well, in this one's case, 150. But the others are 100 minutes to play with, so they could take it a bit slowly and get their costumes around the middle of part 1-ish. As opposed to the new series ones, who only have 45 to 50, 45 to 65. Yeah, 45 to 65 minutes to have an adventure, and therefore get their costumes for that, whilst the older ones were 100 to 150 minutes, so they could take their time with choosing their costumes earlier on, instead of having to rush on an adventure and choosing their costume later on. In some cases, we don't even see them choosing their costumes. 12. And one last thing before I go on to the animation. The Daleks. This is the best use of the Daleks so far. I know I gushed over the Chase and the Daleks Master Plan, and I don't think this story's quite as good as those two, but this is probably the best use of the Daleks. They're at the most cunning, they're at the most evil, and they're at the most, I suppose, manipulative, and yeah, they're playing for time. They're really cool. And the way they're defeated is a bit rushed, but I suppose so much build-up. But they're so great, and there's a massacre in this one. They massacre lots of people. Like Parting the Ways, this is a dark story, at least in terms of Daleks killing people, at least towards the end anyway. Master Plan, I would also say, is dark, well, at least towards the end. But this time it's a bit more for a different reason. The Daleks are massacring people, so yeah, not so nice. Strangely, the second disc on this set is a U, and that contains the reconstruction, reconstruction version of this story as well. So that manages to get away with a U. Well, I mean, it should have been a PG like the story. The animated version, I guess maybe if you can't really tell properly, but then again, sound could be just as nasty. In fact, listen to Big Finish, they've made some pretty gruesome sounding audio, so yeah, massacres could still be presented in audio as pretty PG in some of the reconstructions I've talked about or will be talking about. They managed to get themselves a 12 certificate. So that would be Master Plan Part 12, Massacre Part 4, and we'll see about at least one Pass of Fury from the Deep. We'll see when we get there. I might turn out to be wrong with that, or change my mind. I'll say so when we get to it. then again, the BBFC have been rating every episode of the Jodie Whittaker era, apart from the Saranga Conundrum, a 12. So, anyway, and yeah, I just really like the angle of the Daleks massacring people, just like in Parting Ways. It's not as nasty as Parting, but it goes on a bit longer as they're going around finding more people, whilst in Parting Ways there was a couple Daleks massacred about 100 people on floor 0. And not in a quite confined space on that floor as well. Yeah. That was such a Dalek moment in this, and I think this one is also such a super Dalek moment. And final thing about the Daleks, the voices by Peter Hawkins, I believe. Yeah. Probably the best. These are the best Dalek voices to date. I said the Master Planner managed to succeed with that, and also Daleks Invasion Earth 2150 AD, but I think the Power of the Daleks has the best Dalek audio, Dalek voices to date. In terms from going from an Earthly Child on up to Resolution, at this point in time, they are, of course, there'll be better ones later on, especially in the new series. But at this point, Peter Hawkins has given the best Dalek performance so far, both in terms of a normal Dalek as well as also the Daleks pretending to be servants. So, yeah, that's really cool. Finally, the animation. Okay, at the start, it feels a bit... it doesn't feel quite right. Doesn't work as well. But as we get further through the story, as we go along, the animation gets better. It's mostly with humans that's my issue with it. They haven't quite got the humans, maybe a bit of the movements. But as we go through the story, they kind of improve. What they managed to succeed more so is with the backgrounds, and then later with the Daleks. They look really great. No problems there. It's just that with the human characters, it takes a bit of time for them to fix it out, sort it out a little bit, and help sort it, make it look really cool. But in the end, it looks really great, and we have some great animated episodes, especially in the second half. And it just looks really cool. It's just that there's some times, especially at the start, where it looks a bit dodgy. I also will say, I don't know if I said Power of the Daleks had the better version of the First Doctor's regeneration in animated version, but I think I might change that to say 10th Planet might have done it better. The animated version of the 10th Planet. I think it might have just done the regeneration itself a little bit better. I liked the build-up in the pre-title scene here. I think they added that just as a bonus, a pre-title scene. And because the first story that has a pre-title scene before the title sequence is Castrovalva Part 1. And it also happens again for the Five Doctors, Time in the Rani Part 1, and Remembrance of the Daleks Part 1, and of course the TV movie. And then, it becomes a staple of the new series from The End of the World to Twice Upon a Time, with only 3 stories serving as an exception: Rose, Smith and Jones, and Partners in not having pre-title scenes. In Series 11, Woman Who Ever Felt Worth and Resolution don't have title sequences at all, or even title cards, so everything is pretty much the pre-title scene and the post-title scene as well. And then the rest of them have the titles at the very start. Yeah, that's about right. But the rest of the stories before then, with Rose and Smith and Jones and Partners in Crime exception, all have pre-title scenes. Whilst the classic series, it was 4 exceptions. They just started with the titles. But here, I think they've added it at the start to have a quick recap of what happened before. Maybe Power did have one after all, but I think they just added this one in as a recap for the regeneration scene. And well, it does look good. I just want to say that as I mentioned earlier, the 10th Planet's version may have been slightly better. I think this one adds an extra bit of brightness and light that wasn't originally there. So, anyway. Also, Sharda will get a pre-title sequence for the 2017 completed version, as they'll move the first scene of what was episode 1 to be the first scene of the story, and then throw in the title sequence, and then let it play out as a... But then again, Sharda has been turned from a 6-part story into a 1-part potential sort of movie-like story, a 1-part feature-length story for the 2017 animated version. So it's gone from a standard 6-part story that just wasn't finished, and when they've sorted this out, they moved the first scene of part 1 to be a pre-title sequence, titles, and then the rest of it was played like a movie, in a way, with Tom Baker's final scene wrapping up the story, and of course the last use of the 1963 version of the theme tune used at the end. Not even the 1973-74 version, but the actual 63 version that is going to disappear from the start and end of these stories. When we get to the Faceless ones, we'll get a new title sequence for Patrick Torughton with the Macra Terror, but the theme tune will not change until the Faceless ones part 2. Part 1 is the same, and then you still got 2 episodes of The Web of Fear, 4 and 5, I believe, have the 63 theme at the end for some reason, and then again for the animated version of Sharda, and of course the opening, a shorter version of the 1963 titles for The Day of the Doctor. But yeah, so don't worry, Patrick Torughton fans will get onto the stories with the new title sequence soon, and a new theme as well. I also worked out that the William Hartnell titles and theme are used on on the most number of episodes, at least on, I think it's about 172-ish episodes, whilst Tom Baker's one, which I would think is the next most number, was on about 144, including Sharda. That would add it to 145 or 150, depending on the version you were choosing, whether the 2017 version or the original / 1992 version. Paul McGann version from 2003, that in that case it would still be at 144, because that's Paul McGann, not Tom Baker, so they would not use that title. Curse of the Fatal Death use a similar sort of titles, but I think it's a little bit different, and John Pertwee's season 11 one's the same as Tom Baker's season 18 ones are different as well. So I'm talking about seasons 12 to 17 plus Sharda. And whilst with Hartnell's one, it would be seasons 1 to 3 and season 4 up to the Moonbase for visuals. It's another 4 or 5 episodes for the theme. Anyway, so that's the Power of the Daleks. Overall, great story. Not perfect, but great. I'm not going to give it a 10 out of 10, but I do think it's a brilliant way to start the Patrick Torughton era. And I think it's one-upped over the 10th Planet, and therefore, this is one of the exceptions of a post-regeneration story being better than a regeneration story in the classic series. There are the exceptions are usually in the earlier era stories, so 1, 2, 3, 4. But then, when the later ones, 5, 6, 7, the post-regeneration ones seem to be weaker, especially Twin Dilemma and Time the Rani. And then new series, the post-regeneration stories are... Well, the regeneration story for 9 is better than its post-regeneration story for 10, but 10, 11, 12, the regeneration stories are not as good as their success as post-regeneration stories. So, yes, this is it's an exception of the rule I put down. my rule. Oh well, it doesn't matter. This is still a great story. Anyway, so I'm going to give the Power of the Daleks. I'm going to keep its 9 out of 10 score. I was considering an 8 out of 10 after the several rewatches, but after this one, yeah, keep it at 9. So the Power of the Daleks remains at a 9 out of 10. So that's about it from Power of the Daleks. I don't think this is going to be 25 minutes. It's not going to be 50 minutes, but still, it looks like it's going to be half an hour or something. Anyway, so thank you for watching my review of The Power of the Daleks, Patrick Torughton's first Doctor Who story. Tune in next time where I'll be looking at his second Doctor Who story and the last the penultimate historical overall, but the last one at this point in time, The Highlanders, which is also Jamie's first story. I'll see you guys next time. Goodbye. Don't forget to click below to subscribe to the official Nicholas Payne Retro YouTube channel. Whoops. Yeah. Anyway, so the travellers end up on the planet Vulcan, not to keep... Excuse me. Then Polly gets kidnapped, and... Yeah. Excuse me. Mm-hmm. And maybe could have been like, oh, by the way, yeah. Mm-hmm. Okay, that... Excuse me. What? Lesserson? What? He can do many things, Lesserson, but the one thing he can do best is destroy you. It can do many things, Lesserson, but the one thing it's best capable of doing is exterminating human beings. Hang on. No. It can do many things, Lesserson, but the one thing it's most capable of... It can do many things, Lesserson.
I am your servant. 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 Excuse me. One more. I am your servant.